Hi guys, and welcome to another Hobby Hacker video. In this video I'm going to be showing you how to achieve this glowing OSL effect. These models are from Titan Forge. We're going to be using this guy here that I just happen to have on my desk. And I'm going to be painting it grayscale, same as these are. I've got little touches of metallic going across here, but we've got this light source coming from these candles, and you can see it's giving off quite a convincing, realistic glow effect. So, dead simple. So let's get to it straight away. Get some serious light on the go. Right. So, as I said, this is a Titan Forge miniature. These are available from my manufacturer to print off yourself, or I believe you can buy them from the Titan Forge store as well. But this is one I printed off myself. Nice detail. Yeah, it should be a good fun model. I'm going to be using an airbrush in a lot of this, but realistically, you can do pretty much all of this, without the need for an airbrush. But it just makes it faster, and it's, as you probably know by now, my preferred tool of choice. So I'm just going to run a little cleaner through my brush just to lubricate the needle, get things going. And you can just see on my wet palette at the side here, I've got a lot going on. I'm mid-project right now, but we're just going to use a little space of the palette, so I'm not going to bother changing the paper. I'm going to keep that going for the project I'm working on. So, let's take a little bit of white primer. I'm using a Vallejo surface primer. Stuff gets a lot of bad press, and to be fair, yeah, I'm as bad as everybody else. I've slated this stuff quite substantially. A little bit thinner. But because it's all I can get in my area, I've sort of had to persevere with it. And yeah, now I've been using it a while. It's really good. It's better than I gave it credit for quite some time. That's better. So, first job. Absolute first job is deciding where the light source is coming from. Now, on the example I showed you, I had the monomat here and I had candles either side of him. Well, this is going to be for another base for the same army, but I've not got the base figured out yet, and I wanted to put a quick tutorial together. So I'm going to establish a light source as if it was right in front of him and just in front of his foot, so coming up at a bit of an angle, like in this direction. So I'm going to take the airbrush, I'm going to put the tip where I envisage the light source to be, and I'm going to really gently start applying a single direction light. And my aim here is to achieve quite a high contrast. Now, my light source is coming like this, but where the light source is originating from, that light is going to be spreading out in all directions. So from here, it will be hitting him directly straight on. So I need to sort of replicate that as well. Now, to get a convincing glow, it's all about figuring out where those initial light sources come from. So there I have, let's get a little closer to the camera. There I have my initial light source sussed out. Now, there's going to be just normal top-down zenithal light hitting the model, like, from the moon, or whatever it is in the setting you've decided it's come from. So we're going to give him, on the non-glowy side, just a nice zenithal from above. Helps if I do it on camera. So we've got a nice strong zenithal from the top. Same here, we've got a nice strong zenithal from the top. And from the front, we've now got two sources of light. Definitely you can see that come from the top. Definitely you can pick out that from the bottom. From here, I'm going to crack on with the airbrush. I'm going to use these light sources as a reference for now. But what they're not going to be is the be all and end all. These are not my final colors. These are not. They're just a good reference for me as I get started. So let's get some black and some white on my palette. I'm just using Vallejo black, Vallejo white. Nice big brush. I don't know what size, this is a number 1. These are watercolors brushes. I ordered a complete set of watercolors paints and these arrived as a free gift. Now, yeah, I use a lot of Winsor & Newton, my Series 7, I love, but also these are Winsor & Newton Professional Watercolor Sables. I love these brushes, but they're getting hard to find. And I picked up these just the other day because I needed something with a nice point. And do you know what? Credit where it's due, these are really nice brushes. It's a sable brush. And yeah, it's blooming lovely. Bit of water on my palette. Yeah, should do well. So I'm going for a darker color on here. I'm going for a lighter tone on the skin. Now I'm going to establish that contrast now. So with a nice watered down, almost glaze level paint, I'm going to go in. Now why have I picked it so thin? So that as it dries in, a lot of this lighting value is going to remain. And I'm still going to be able to see it. Turn the compressor off so you can actually hear me. So with a nice big brush, I'm just going to go in and stick that initial base color down on all these skin areas. I mean, here's a really nice example of where you can see. Let's turn the light off so we can see better. Just here, you can see, because I'm painting with a glaze, that all that information on the shadows is definitely still portrayed, and yet the whole thing has picked up a level of brightness because I'm glazing it with a nice pale grey. So there we go. Not much of a difference, but we're now going to go back in and darken down all the exposed muscle areas. So light back on. Yeah, not too bad. You can sort of see it quite well from there. And we're going to do exactly the same. I'm not going to wait for the model to dry or anything. I'm just going to darken down this glaze quite considerably. I don't want it to be full black because I want to be able to put a black wash on it and that to give me good definition between the wash and the paint. And again, I've gone as a very thin glaze and I'm applying it almost as if it was a wash. Because I want to see that lighting information that I've laid down with the airbrush, or equally you could lay that down with a paintbrush. Right, now while I wait for that to dry, I'm going to start picking out those teeth with a bright white. And as you can see, we're beginning to build up now the first stages of contrast on this. He's got some kind of armband thing going on one arm, and he's got a chain. So he's got like a leather armband here, and he's got like chain wrapped around this wrist here. So I'm gonna paint this armband in full black. So I've got good definition now on that strap. This one's chained, so I'm going to paint that in a metallic. I'm now going to go around and pick out all these stitches in a straight white. I've painted all the areas that I'm leather in black. I'm going to leave those black. I've painted all his bones in white. I've painted his stitching nice and bright. I've painted all the potential metal parts in black because That's the best colour for painting silver over the top of. So that is Flow Improver, a little bit of airbrush thinner. By adding Flow Improver, you keep that thick consistency of a wash, but you can reduce the pigment concentration and make it more and more transparent without breaking the paint, or the paint falling apart and becoming grainy because there is not enough binder left to hold the paint together. So if you want a transparent black in this case, but you don't want it to be really strong pigmented, so it's going to flow but leave a lot of that tonality from underneath showing through, then you can achieve that quite simply by mixing in Flow Aid. And because it has a nice thick consistency, it keeps the perfect kind of wash consistency going on. Clip the bone a little bit there, which we don't want. So I'm going to leave that dry naturally because I don't want the hairdryer to blow the wash out of the recesses. I want it to naturally pool in those recesses. So I'm going to lay that down. I'm going to leave that dry. And I'll be back in a moment. Right, so I'm all dry. You notice it looks a little wet in places. I'm using a gloss black so that when I make a wash, I get a gloss wash effect. So I'm going to now make another wash. Even more reduced than that first. So I mean, this really is much more transparent. Take this and draw it. Take some of this. I think we can go even lighter with that. Nice. And with this, I'm going to start layering it slowly over all the skin. Just wicking off any excess that's pooling in places, where it seems a little excessive. And whilst I need to let this all dry, we're just about done with the base coating step there now. Now, I want gravity to help me out here, so that as the wash dries, it pulls in all the correct places, so I don't want to lie him down. So I'm just gonna pop him in a chuck vise, make sure he's nice and level. Where was it? Ah, there it is. And leave him to dry, and I shall see you again in a bit. All right, I think we're dry enough. So, if I go back in and zenithal highlight with the airbrush, or apply my highlights from, you know, the various points where the light is, it's going to not only highlight, but it's going to kill off a lot of this shading that our wash has put in. So, if I hit here, all this area is going to be white, you know, all this, and we're going to lose the definition between the muscles. And whilst that would be more realistic, that's what would happen in the real world, it's going to look wrong at scale. So what we sort of need to do is compromise between the two techniques. So I'm going to zenithal highlight my world light from the top, and I'm going to use the airbrush to achieve that. And then I'm going to just pick out a few areas with the airbrush, and then go in and get the finer detail, like the tips of the toes, things like that. Some of these tiny little muscle groups with the paintbrush. So, I mean, there's no reason you couldn't do all of this with a paintbrush, but yeah, the airbrush is my preferred way of doing it. So I'm going to add a little flow aid to what is still my white primer right from the first stage. And to be fair, I consider the stage we're at here as still part of the priming stage, really, because for me, I like to make sure I've established the light, all the light volumes. I need to know that's all correct in the priming stage. So realistically, in my head at least, we are still in the priming stage. Yeah, nice. And I'm going to do exactly the same now from this direction, from our source of light that we've got on the base about here. So showing at the front, bottom of the skulls, I'm going to pick out the little details. I've got my crown off so I can get the finer detail. Obviously tip dry because we're spraying white here is a very real consideration. And let's start establishing this glow from the bottom. Now, something any photographer would be able to tell you, for example, is in the real world, the closer a source of light is to an object, the quicker the fall off is. A way of explaining that is, if you hold a ball up to a light that's very, very close, you'd have a very intense small area of light, and the rest would go into shadow very quickly. And yet if you held that same ball up in the sun, the whole ball would appear to be lit, and the shadowed area would be much, much, much smaller. Now, from the top, we've got an overall lighting, And yet from the bottom, we've got a light that's very close to him. So we're going to have to work on the contrast levels to give us high contrast with this close light and soft contrast with the top light, which is the overall light. And I'm going to achieve that by slapping in a few shadows. So I'm just cleaning my brush out. Give it a good old clean because I'm going from white to black. Where's me cleaner? There's me cleaner. And I'm going to just go with this same old wash that I was using previously. And directly behind these skulls, for example. There we go. Directly behind these skulls would be in complete shadow because of how close this light is. So we're going to turn the model around. And we're going to throw that wash on. This area up here would be much more shadowed because of how close that light is. So we're just going to go in and reinforce some of these shadows just to create that strong fall off kind of effect. Until we can clearly see, let's get a little closer, that we have quite a strong and distinct glow coming from this area. So we're now going to go in, final touches before we add the colour and do the metallic work. We are literally going to go in with pure black and pure white and do highest highlight, lowest low lights. Stuff that you would struggle, I wouldn't say it's impossible, but I'd say you'd struggle to do with an airbrush. And don't forget, you know, you don't need the airbrush. It can all be done with glazes, but it makes it quicker with an airbrush without a doubt. Yuck. Think of how reflective a certain substance is going to be, because a more reflective object is going to reflect from a greater distance away than a less reflective object. So, you know, if I had metal going across his chest, that would all reflect. Every single link would reflect a little piece of this green light. Yeah, it's these little tiny details that sell the glow. And if we're painting an OSL, let's be honest, we want it to look like it's been lit up by battery power. You know, that's the ultimate goal. Let's go in with some very dilute but very strong pigmented black. And let's just start picking out these details. Because this model's black and white, you really, really need to push those details to make them stand out. See, now this bit of bone, was all but invisible because it was in the shadow. Now, because it's in the shadow, it's going to still reflect this light, just not this light. And I've got this beautiful area of absolute full shadow under his hood, full black. Now what I want to do is go in and pick out a few details. And this doesn't take much, a few little dots in the right place, and your mind will fill in the blanks. And all of a sudden, he seems to have eyes and a few facial details underneath that blackness that was his hood. Again, a good clean out with a better cleaner, because we're going from a pure black to our bright green. Now, any green will do for this. The green of my choice is Warcolors Green 4. Very vibrant, very green. I've also used Vallejo German Camo Bright Green to good effect. I've done the rest of my models in the Warcolors, so I'm going to do this again. But the principle is exactly the same. Little bit, I have got 1 drop of green in here. Quite a lot of flow improver, not quite that much. About 3 drops of flow improver and maybe 2 drops of thinner, roughly. Give that a good old stir up. And we've created, as you can see, a glaze. An absolute classic. Apply it with a brush glaze, and I'm going to apply it with my airbrush really, really sparingly. I'm going to completely leave that dry. If you can see the distance, I started off applying from about here. I'm now applying from about here. And that is just to get a general tone or a hint of green across the whole model. I've applied where I want the glow, but now this hint is going to really, really sell the effect. Again, hit that to dry. And what we have, if we go back to as we had before with the light off so it's not overly reflective, is a really convincing glow effect on a monotone model. Right, I hope you found this useful. It's a really good fun technique. It's one of my favourites by far. And anything you want to know, drop it in the comments. I will get back to you as soon as I possibly can. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.